The Velour Club sat in the heart of Lower Manhattan like a wound that never closed. Dark wood, low lights, the kind of silence that wasn't really silence at all, just violence holding its breath. Nikolai Voss stood at the bar with a glass of scotch he hadn't touched, watching the door. His wedding had been 3 hours ago. His bride was late to her own reception. She ran. The thought arrived calm and cold. She actually ran. Marcus leaned in from his left. Security says the car is still out front. She didn't leave the building. Nikolai set down the glass. Then where is she? 3rd floor, the women's room off the east corridor. Marcus paused. She's been in there for 40 minutes. Nikolai didn't respond. He'd married Irina Solberg because her father controlled 4 distribution networks across the Northeast. He'd married her because the alliance was clean and the terms were favorable, and because, of the women his lawyers had presented, she had looked at him across the negotiation table with the least amount of obvious fear. He'd thought that meant she understood the world she was marrying into. He was starting to think he'd been wrong. He found her himself. The corridor was empty. He knocked once on the bathroom door. No answer. He knocked again. Irina. A pause. Then, I'll be out in a moment. Her voice was steady. Remarkably steady for someone hiding in a bathroom. He noted that. You have 30 seconds before I come in. The door opened in 10. She was composed in a way that looked like it had cost her something. Dark hair pinned back, the white dress still perfect, eyes dry. If she'd been crying, she'd fixed the evidence. She looked at a point just past his shoulder. I apologize for the delay. Why were you in there? I needed a moment. 40 minutes is not a moment. Something flickered across her face. I'm sorry. It won't happen again. Nikolai studied her. She was good at stillness. He recognized it, the kind of stillness that came from learning very early that movement attracted attention, and attention attracted pain. What are you hiding? He asked. Her eyes finally met his. Excuse me? You've been in a bathroom for 40 minutes on your wedding night. You came out with your hands folded and your face blank, and you're looking at me like you're waiting for a blow to land. He kept his voice even. That's not nerves, that's practice. What are you hiding? Nothing. Try again. A long silence. And down the corridor, faint music drifted up from the reception. Someone laughed. Normal sounds from a world that felt very far away. There's a man at the reception, Irina said finally. Someone I recognized. Who? Her jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. His name is Gregor Falk. He works for your associate, Dmitry Lash. Nikolai went still. I know who Gregor Falk is. Then you know what he does. Her voice was careful now, each word placed like a foot on uncertain ground. What he's done. Tell me what he's done to you. She looked away. Irina. It was 2 years ago. The words came out flat and measured, like she'd rehearsed stripping the emotion out of them. I was at a charity event. My father sent me to represent the family. Falk was there, he was... She stopped, started again. He was persistent. And then he wasn't just persistent. The scotch Nikolai hadn't drunk suddenly felt like a missed opportunity. Did your father know? Yes. And Falk works for Dmitry Lash. My father needed Lash's cooperation on a shipping contract. A pause so brief it almost wasn't there. The contract was more important. Nikolai stood very still. This was the part, he thought, where a different man might express sympathy, might say something careful and calibrated. But what he actually felt was something far less manageable, a cold, specific fury that had nothing to do with strategy. Your father knew, he said again, and he sent you here, tonight, to a reception where Gregor Falk was standing 20 feet from the bar. I don't think he knew Falk would be here. I think he simply didn't ask. Didn't ask. Nikolai looked at the woman his lawyers had selected for him, the woman who had sat across negotiation tables with that careful stillness, the woman who had said, I do this afternoon without flinching, and understood for the first time what that composure had actually cost her to build. Come with me, he said. Where? Away from this corridor. He took her to his office on the 4th floor, a room that had no association with weddings or receptions or the particular performance they were both supposed to be giving downstairs. She sat in the chair across from his desk and folded her hands in her lap, and he stood at the window and stared at the street below. Why didn't you tell anyone? Before tonight? Who would I have told? The question sat between them with the weight of an obvious answer neither of them wanted to say out loud. You could have told me, before we signed anything, before the ceremony. I met you 4 times before today. All 4 times your lawyers were in the room. She met his eyes steadily. And the man who hurt me works for a partner you depend on. I had no reason to believe telling you would help. I had every reason to believe it would make things worse. He couldn't argue with that. He didn't try. Where is Falk now? Still at the reception, as far as I know. Nikolai pulled out his phone, typed a message to Victor, his head of security. Gregor Falk. Remove him from the building. Don't make it visible. He sent it and put the phone face down on the desk. He's leaving, he told her. She absorbed this. And then what? And then we discuss what happens next. Meaning what happens to me. He turned to face her fully. Why do you keep phrasing things that way? What happens to me? What you'll do to me, like I'm an outcome you're waiting for. Because that's what I've been, consistently, for the past 2 years. There was no self-pity in her voice, just accuracy. An outcome, a variable in other people's calculations, my father's, Falk's, yours. You think you're a variable in my calculation? I'm a shipping alliance in a white dress. Yes. Nikolai sat down across from her, which was not something he typically did, sitting across from people rather than standing above them. He noticed her register the shift. I signed a contract with your father, he said slowly. I didn't know what he'd cost you to get it. If I had, he paused, I would have handled things differently. You can't know that. I'm telling you. She studied him the way someone studied a map with missing sections, looking for what wasn't marked. Why does it matter to you? He didn't have a clean answer for that. The honest answer was unsatisfying. Something about her stillness, something about the 40 minutes in the bathroom, something about a woman who had learned to make herself so small and so controlled that even her own wedding felt like a performance she was surviving rather than living. Because I've spent 15 years building something on fear, he said, and I'm getting tired of what that means for everyone who ends up near it. She was quiet for a moment. That's not the answer I expected. What did you expect? Something about business, about necessity, about how the world works. She almost smiled. Not quite, but close. You people always explain cruelty with practicality. You people. He noted that too. The small distance she was maintaining, the categorical space between herself and the life she'd married into. Falk will be gone in the next 10 minutes, he said. The reception will wind down within the hour. Tonight, you take whichever room you want on the west side of the penthouse, and you lock the door and you sleep. That's all. She looked at him carefully. And tomorrow? Tomorrow we talk about what you actually want, not what the contract says, not what your father negotiated. He leaned forward slightly. What do you want, Irina? If it could be anything. The question seemed to genuinely surprise her. She took a breath. I want to finish my master's degree. I deferred it when my father started, when the negotiations began. Done, she blinked. You can't just... I can. I just did. What else? Another pause, longer this time, testing the ground. I want to be honest with you, she said quietly, about everything. Not because the contract requires it, but because I'm exhausted from being careful, from measuring every word. I want to be in a room with someone and not calculate every possible outcome before I speak. Something in his chest did a thing he didn't have language for yet. You can be honest with me, he said. I won't always like it. I might push back, but I won't punish you for it. How do I know that? You don't, not yet. He stood. I moved to the door. But you came out of that bathroom when I knocked. That's something. She stood too, smoothing the white dress with both hands. I almost didn't. I know, you did anyway. He opened the door. That tells me more about you than the contract does. She passed through into the corridor ahead of him, and for just a moment she stopped and looked back, and in her expression was something fragile and precise. Not trust, not yet, but the first careful consideration of whether trust might eventually be possible. He wasn't a man who'd earned softness, he knew that, but he was beginning to think he might be a man who could learn what to do with it. Downstairs, the reception continued. Music played, champagne was poured, people made toasts to a marriage they knew nothing about. And on the fourth floor, in the corridor outside a room that had nothing to do with weddings, two people stood at the very beginning of something that wasn't a transaction anymore, even if neither of them had the words for what it actually was yet. They would find them. That would take time. But the first brick had been laid in the only foundation that ever holds anything. One person deciding after everything to tell the truth, and another person deciding to listen.